Hello.
Morning.
Good morning. Hi. Good
Hi,
morning.
Destini.
Hello.
Should we test out our screen sharing now, or or should we wait until it's time?
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Yeah.
I need to find the button.
Yeah.
Is it the one with the computer? Hi, Alison.
Morning, Allison. Yeah, I would
Hello,
try it
Jesse.
now just to figure it out.
All right, let's see.
One thing I'll say is, and I know we probably would do this already, I noticed in a previous session, I think only one of us should be like off mute at once, just because I noticed there was like a bit of echoing.
Okay. Hi, Kasey.
It also
Okay.
seems fine right now.
Hi, Sande.
Okay, let me try.
Should we all join here at the start, or should just the first group be on here and then we join after they finish?
Yeah, maybe just the first group on now, and then and then we'll switch it up.
All right, sounds good.
Cool.
Sounds good.
And y'all know how to leave the moderation? You can hit the leave button up the top. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
There we go. Good morning, Krystal.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect.
Thumbs up. Krystal, since you're part of the second presentation, we're gonna have you, if you hit the leave button at the top, that you'll go into the audience, and then when it's the second presentation, you can hit share audio video, and then you'll come back into the presenters
Okay.
page.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Alison, Destini, do you have two other presenters that are going to be joining?
The only other presenter was going to be LaTonya Waller, but I can't see everybody that is here, so I don't know if she is here or not.
I don't see her.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list. It looks like because she wasn't sure if she was going to be able to get away from her commitment. She really wanted to be here, but I think
Okay.
Destini, do you agree it's probably okay to proceed?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then let's do that. Let's get going so that we have time for both presentations and hopefully some good discussion across. So welcome everybody to this session 5 titled, what's the session 5 title? This is Strategies for Developing Research Partnerships to Guide Practice. This is a super interest to me because I love the research practice partnerships. We have two presentations. The first is titled Bridging the Gap Between Theory and Practice, Developing University School Partnerships with a Dual Identity. And we're going to get going on that. We've got two presenters here with us today, Destini Braxton Braxton is a third-year doctoral student in educational psychology at VCU. Additionally, she is in her 4th year teaching at Bouchal Middle School. She is a 6th grade special education and math teacher. Her research interests include student motivation, emotion, teacher trust, and teacher-student relationships for students with learning disabilities belonging to underrepresented groups in mathematics. Co-presenting with her is Alison Koenka. Alison is an assistant professor of educational psychology at VCU. In this role, Dr. Koenka engages in a variety of research, teaching, and service activities at the intersection of development, motivation, and equity. In her research program, she's especially interested in the motivational consequences of academic feedback and how educators, researchers, and systems can more equitably center and foster motivation among adolescents who are understudied and/or historically marginalized. So welcome both of you, and we'll you got 20 minutes to present. We'll then switch off and have the other presentation, and then hopefully have a little bit of time for discussion afterwards. One last note, if you're in the audience, post chat along the way, just reflections on what's being presented and also any questions you have, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end. All right, thanks so much.
Okay, hi everyone. Again, my name is Destini Braxton, and the title of our presentation is called Bridging the Gap Between Theory and Practice, Developing University-School Partnerships with Dual Identity.
Okay, and again, my name is Alison Koenka, and first we wanted to acknowledge our 2 other co-authors on this presentation, Ms. Waller and Nicolai. It's been really, really fun for the 4 of us to work not only on this presentation, but also the partnership that we're going to be talking about today, thanks to our wonderful leader, Destini. So we wanted to actually start our presentation by hearing input from all of you, or just sort of engaging all of you in your connection to this work. So as an opening question, we wanted to encourage all of you to put in the chat who we have here in this session, or in other words, what roles or identities, and notice that we pluralized, or at least possibly pluralized identities, do you identify with within the education field? So in other words, do you consider yourself, would you call yourself an educator, a researcher, a principal, a student, a mentor, a mentee? I would say that for myself, I identify as an educator, a researcher, a mentor, a mentee, a student, a lifelong student. So we'll pause just for a minute or two to wait for the chat responses to come in. See here, ooh. I see that Maggie put student, an educator, and a researcher. Dr. Becker, a learner, which I love. So many people here, and I love the identities that all of you are raising. And I see a really important theme emerging here. Wow, so many. This is so exciting. A really important theme emerging, which is perfectly aligned with the theme of this presentation, which are the multiple identities that we all bring to this space. So awesome. A wanderer, that's super cool. Student, educator, researcher, parent and student. I love that somebody mentioned parent, because that's another really important role within and beyond, of course, the education system. All right, and feel free to keep adding your thoughts into the chat as we transition to the objectives of this presentation.
Thank you all for the amazing responses. I'm excited to continue on with this presentation after seeing everybody's responses and identities in the chat. So our 3 main objectives for our presentation today is to 1, cast a spotlight on the benefits and experiences of developing school partnerships from an educator and researcher perspective. 2, provide recommendations for providing mentorship and professional support to students who identify as both an educator and researcher. And then lastly, provide tips on how to develop school partnerships as a part-time doctoral student.
Okay, so before we get any further, we wanted to offer some kind of a working definition of what we mean by a university or school partnership. So a few things that we want to highlight about the nature of these types of partnerships is one, the highly dynamic and the bi-directional nature of them, where specifically we think of university and school partnerships as highly dynamic and a bi-directional collaboration between scholars who are situated within a university and a school setting. And also, for those of you who have heard this term before, we see a university-school partnership, at least the way that we envision it, as very closely related to and perhaps even synonymous with community-engaged research. And so just a final thing that I'll highlight about this or really try to emphasize is I think that it can be helpful in offering kind of how we define a university-school partnership, also offer kind of a non-definition, so what we see it as not being. And specifically, I would argue that the way that we kind of define our partnerships is kind of antithetical to what's often thought of when we think of school-based research, which what comes to my mind is often something that's much more kind of unidirectional and transactional. And again, we just really wanted to highlight in this presentation how kind of dynamic and bi-directional and truly highly collaborative we see these types of partnerships as being.
Okay, so to quickly talk about the Bouchon Middle School and VCU partnership. We are currently working on a project, and the purpose of our project is to collaborate in order to investigate what motivational elements and emotions are involved in developing teacher-student relationships among adolescents in urban middle school science classrooms. And of particular interest, we are focusing on student emotions and teacher trust. And these are important in both aspects of me being on the VCU side and being a teacher at Bouchon Middle School, because I can draw from my experience and research interests as a teacher and how student emotions and teacher trust comes into play, and why I feel it is so important when developing teacher-student relationships outside of just being a teacher in the classroom. So why Bouchon Middle School? Because it gives me a chance to close the gap between theory and practice. Again, because I am a third-year student at VCU, and I am also a fourth-year teacher at Bouchon Middle School. Meeting the demands of students' social-emotional needs. Bouchon Middle School, we have been trying to implement more strategies and ways to meet the needs of our students socially and emotionally. And as my research interest and as my co-authors research interest, it aligns perfectly with the purpose of our partnership. Implementing social emotional learning. Again, I want to emphasize that that has been a big goal for Bouchon Middle School in general. And then deepening our understanding of student emotions. And I feel like as we continue to navigate during an ongoing pandemic, that is extremely essential, especially with, you know, everything that goes on outside of our student and teachers' lives. And again, understanding what the students bring to the classroom and how teachers can have a better understanding at navigating why students express their emotions the way that they do. So drawing on the importance of my educator and researcher identity, I decided to list the benefits of bringing both identities to our university school partnerships. So as an educator, I would be able to provide classroom insight and teacher voice. I can also engage in research-based social emotional practices. I can also reflect on current practices, which is phenomenal, especially because as I'm in the classroom, I can also see what gaps need to be filled in from a researcher standpoint. And then my experiential knowledge regarding classroom practices and dynamics. And I think that that is extremely important to bring because as a researcher, sometimes we may not always have that educator insight and bring the teacher voice again into the research as well. So, and then drawing from my researcher identity, I can build upon my professional goals to develop professional developments to bring awareness to the importance of emotion and teacher trust among students and teachers, which again is one of the many goals for this partnership with Bouchal and VCU. Also, as a part-time student, this has made, again, bridging the gap between practice and research extremely flexible and convenient. And then engage in research opportunities that speak to my dual identity as a teacher and researcher. Again, because you can see in my research where my passions are driven from. And I can speak to my classroom experience and continue to grow as an educator and a researcher from both point of views and all of the opportunities presented to me along my PhD journey.
And I think that everything that Destini just shared about her dual identity is a perfect transition into this next part of the presentation, where I'm going to reflect a little bit on the privilege and the opportunity I have to be collaborating in this work from a mentorship capacity, and specifically the privilege that I have and the opportunity, how lucky I am to have the opportunity to work with, mentor, and learn from Destini. So the first thing that I really want to highlight is how it would be impossible to overstate what an incredible learning opportunity this is for me. And in particular, the opportunity to mentor all students, and I'll speak kind of in particular with this presentation in terms of the opportunity to mentor Destini in particular and part-time PhD students in general. I would say that, and again, this applies to both Destini specifically and then more generally, something that is really unique and wonderful about the opportunity to mentor and to work with and to learn from part-time PhD students is that simultaneously, at the same time that they are pursuing their PhD, they also are acquiring or they kind of have their other toe dipped in this really rich professional setting, which, as Destini just talked about, results in all sorts of invaluable ideas, experiential knowledge, and what a wonderful opportunity it is for somebody like me to work with and kind of learn from the student in that capacity and in that way. And then also related to that, I think in particular, mentoring students who are also educators, especially within the division partnership, it would be impossible to overstate how incredibly beneficial that has been, not only to the partnership that Destini is leading, but also another partnership that Destini and I, along with lots of other people, are collaborating on. So again, just to give, while trying to be succinct, I want to give a couple of examples. One that's more kind of tangible and logistical, and one that's very intangible in very specific ways that an opportunity to collaborate with Destini through her kind of dual identity has blown my mind and transformed our research. So as Jesse mentioned in the introduction, one of my major areas of quote expertise, I put expertise in quotes because I consider myself a lifelong learner in this regard, but one major area of my research program centers on academic feedback. And I've spent the past 11 years thinking like a lot about feedback. And in a conversation that Destini and I had as we were kind of beginning our work together, I was thinking about feedback in one way, about feedback as being really critical to fostering student trust. And Destini said to me, yeah, that's great, but I'm telling you that from not only my research perspective, but also my educator perspective, trust is essential for delivering and a student actually receiving feedback. So I share that kind of anecdotal example as something that happened over a year ago, blew my mind, and I don't believe that would have happened without Destini's really unique dual identity. And then also, just to kind of speak to a logistical or more technical example, which is really important, Destini in our collaboration meetings and our partnership meetings often chimes in with critical details about school scheduling, for example, things that we're planning to do that simply won't work because we don't have that experiential knowledge of being in the schools that we're partnering with in the same way that Destini does. So again, all of that is to say that it would be impossible to overstate how incredible of an opportunity it is for me to work with and learn from Destini and other part-time PhD students in our program. And then I'll just speak really briefly about the importance of mentorship, especially in the context of partnerships. And I think that unfortunately in academia, there are a lot of aspects of it where there's a lot of kind of hidden curriculum. And especially perhaps in the context of engaging in these types of partnerships. And so something that I really try to do as a mentor and how I try to help support the project is really sort of communicating and making those aspects of the hidden curriculum as transparent as possible. I also think that with these partnerships and with research in general, there's always unexpected things that happen. And especially as somebody who is engaged in research collaborations for the past decade, what I hope that I can do is help colleagues like Destini to anticipate the unexpected, to help them plan for reasonable timeframes, but also at the same time to normalize those timeframes shifting when 10 out of 10 times they do. So I'll stop there, but again, it would be impossible to kind of overemphasize the incredible opportunity that it is for me to collaborate in these partnerships with Destini and other students.
Really briefly, talking about professional support. This is from Ms. LaTonya Waller's standpoint, that university school partnerships provide a unique opportunity for schools and staff. While not new, more school-based staff have dual roles as a student and teacher, giving them the opportunity to reflect on practices and theory simultaneously. An essential component of school leadership is to support everyone, whether they're a scholar, a student, a family member, or a staff member. Support for staffs who have dual roles can include creating flexible schedules when possible, participating in research, providing feedback, share experiences and guidance, provide knowledge of district protocols and procedures, and allowing them to participate in decision-making sessions. Just to name a few ways how principals and higher staff members and in higher roles can support teachers that also are in school, whether it's full-time or part-time. Next, we're just gonna end with some tips on how to create partnerships, provide mentorships, tips from a part-time PhD perspective, and then as an educator and from a professional standpoint.
Okay, so I'll start with the first couple of tips. And in terms of creating partnerships, what our authorship team really wants to emphasize with the 2 tips that are written there is first to create partnerships with schools or districts or communities more broadly where the mission really aligns with your research goals. And importantly and relatedly, before reaching out to create those partnerships, as the researcher to really think about and reflect how specifically the school or the community member will benefit from that partnership. So I guess like what I would say sort of to emphasize and summarize both of those tips, and something that I try to remind myself of regularly as a researcher, is this is really, these types of partnerships really aren't about me and my interests and my goals. In these partnerships, in this partnership in particular that Destini is leading, it's about the community partner benefiting to the greatest extent possible from the partnership. In terms of tips related to providing mentorship, I would just say that something that I would strongly emphasize is really not only just believing in your students, but really centering and celebrating the incredible strengths and values and insight, which is often quite unique, that they bring to the project. Also, be a learner. There are lots of things that I have lots of blind spots as somebody kind of given, for example, that I have never been a K-12 teacher. Be a learner in that way, and be a learner from your PhD students in particular that are engaging in that work. And then also, I think it's a really important responsibility of a mentor to be transparent and realistic, especially given your previous experiences in engaging in these partnerships.
From a part-time PhD student standpoint, my tips to you are the following. Regardless of the unequal research funding, you can create various partnerships and research opportunities just like your full-time PhD colleagues. And again, your student status does not define your researcher success and expertise. From a educator standpoint, allow your expertise and experience as an educator help drive your passion for your research and education, meaning it should be extremely obvious and evident why you are passionate about the certain topics that you are researching as a researcher. And lastly, your voice as an educator is just as valuable as your researcher voice when developing university school partnerships or just doing research going forward. It is all valuable and it all ties together, regardless of whether you think your educator voice speaks louder or your researcher voice speaks louder. It all holds value in the education field. And then the professional tips: be open to the benefits that university school partnerships can foster, such as insights on scholar needs and potential solutions. Fully understand the research goals and communicate authentically.
Okay, so I think that we're out of time. And so what we will do is we will leave you with this question. And if there's time, maybe return to it in the question and answer session. But now that we have discussed our own identities and the roles that they play when creating these university school partnerships, we would love for all of you to consider how, and put in the chat if you'd like as well during the transition to the next presentation. How have you seen your various identities displayed within your research and or within your partnerships? So again, would love to hear your thoughts in the chat about that. And then also, how has or have your identities supported you or assisted in developing your passion for your research? Something that we're hoping to kind of convey as an important bottom line is these dual or multiple identities are so invaluable. And we sort of encourage all of you to think about bringing your whole selves into the research process. So there we go.
Again, Alison and I will look forward to seeing your responses in the chat again as we transition to the next presentation. On this slide, we thought to include our emails if you wanted to reach out to us about anything that we talked about in our presentation, and feel free to follow us on Twitter. My Twitter name is @Destini Braxton. Corey's Twitter name is Corey D. Nicolai. Alison's Twitter name is Koenka. And then Miss LaTonya Waller, she's a principal at Bouchard, and she has included our Bouchal Twitter, which is at TC Bouchal.
All right, thank you. And if you know, what would be great is if you could post all of those in the chat as well, so people could copy them and follow you. Very good, thank you. That was a great presentation. Very interesting stuff. Let's transition to the second one, and then hopefully have some time at the end for some conversation around it. So if you're part of the second presentation, why don't you log into the moderation area? Here we go. Very good. And feel free to share your slides if you have some slides to share. And I'm going to introduce this second presentation. It's called Picture of Practice Revealed, Unpacking a Researcher-Practitioner Partnership. Our first presenter is Margaret K. Wallace. Margaret Wallace is a second-year doctoral student at VCU in the Educational Psychology program. Her research interests include understanding how teacher efficacy for utilizing trauma-informed care practices influences student outcomes, such as motivation, well-being, and other academic outcomes. Kasey Dye is a doctoral student at VCU in the Special Education Department. Kasey's research interests include special education teachers, relationships with their colleagues and administrators, school administrators' preparation and knowledge of special education law, and how these factors connect to special educators' job satisfaction and retention. Sande Dawes is the coordinator for the Petersburg Partnership, in addition to the professional development coordinator in the VCU Office of Strategic Engagement. She designs, coordinates, conducts, and evaluates educational programs, workshops, and trainings that support culturally relevant and responsive practices for K-12 educators. And finally, Krystal Thompkins is the executive director of teaching and learning with Petersburg City Public Schools. In this role, she oversees all core content areas, develops strategic plans for content creation, assessment analysis, manages instructional delivery, professional development, and evaluates the effectiveness of division-wide instructional programs. Welcome to you all, and I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our session. So my name is Maggie. I was an evaluator on this partnership with Kasey. We evaluated the professional development this past summer. And so similar to our last presenters, and thank you, Alison and Destini, you guys provided a great foundation for our presentation as well. So similar to Alison and Destini, we're also going to start out with a quick engaging question. If you can, just put your thoughts in the chat on how do you see collaboration as part of the promise to public education. So in keeping with the theme of the MERC conference, we chose this topic. So we'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and put some ideas in the chat. Essential, yes, definitely. Awesome. Yes, bi-directional for sure. Thanks so much, everybody. So in terms of, just because of time, we'll move on, but please keep putting your thoughts in the chat and we'll try to circle back at the end when we have time. Thank you so much. So I'll turn it over to Krystal to provide the backstory of our partnership.
Well, good morning, everyone. As was introduced, I'm Krystal Thompkins. I'm the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning in Petersburg City Public Schools, and we are certainly excited about the partnership that we've experienced with Virginia Commonwealth University. And just as Alison and Destini laid the stage so well for us, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about this partnership and why partnerships matter, specifically with urban schools and your local research universities such as VCU. I'm going to talk a little bit about professional development and the instructional coaching that came as a result of this partnership. And as somebody stated in the chat, communication is key. So how did we get here? here's our backstory. The VDOE, Virginia Department of Education, identified Petersburg City Public Schools as one of those divisions that had one or more schools that were considered persistently low performing or low achieving and in need of some external support. So this is how this partnership started. As a result of that identification, a memorandum of understanding was signed between Petersburg City Public Schools and VCU to provide support through their Urban Educator Collaborative. And with this partnership, it started out as face-to-face coaching, but COVID was upon us. So we had to do a bit of a shift, a pivot to virtual support. And we're continuing now to provide some on-site instructional coaching and professional opportunities for our high school teachers. As a result of this pivot, a teacher dashboard was created. It housed all of the resources and the professional development slides so that our teachers could go back and take a look at the professional development and coaching strategies that they received. What was unique about this partnership is that it was from a strengths-based and reflection approach. We didn't look at the deficits of our teachers, but really built upon their strengths and really had them reflect on their own practice through this partnership. So, partnerships matter. And why do they matter? VCU worked in collaboration with Petersburg to identify core content teachers to provide them with that instructional coaching. One of the things that we have are instructional coaches in our elementary and our middle schools, but we did not have instructional coaches at our high school. And this is where that VCU partnership came and filled in that gap. They supported our high school teachers with lesson planning, improving pedagogy, as well as their content knowledge. Those things were provided by having monthly professional development sessions based on the needs of the school, as well as the division. And consistent communication has been a critical part of the success of this partnership. VCU and Petersburg stay in touch to discuss information that is happening in our buildings, next steps, and address any concerns that we might have. So clearly, this partnership does and continues to matter. So here's a little feedback from one of our teachers who went through our program last year. And as she stated, that continuous help and guidance from my coach on a daily basis helped me to engage my students. And what more can you ask than teachers who are reflective practitioners, but find the value, as Destini and Alison talked about, that trusting relationship that helped this teacher really understand her role as a teacher, but also trust a coach and give that kind of feedback.
Hey everyone, I'm Sande Dawes, and I was the coordinator for the Petersburg Partnership. And I'm going to share a little bit of our picture of practice, talk about that COVID pivot that Krystal had mentioned earlier, and dive a little more deeply into the idea that partnerships matter with the notion of relationships. And we heard that echoed in the previous presentation. So let's get started. It was so important for us to think flexibly, especially when COVID started to rear its ugly head. And we really had we had to do some just-in-time technology introductions. And that looked like, what is Zoom? What is a breakout room? How do we use whiteboards? So we started off with this as an illustration of one of the PDs, synchronous and asynchronous learning. And even within this PD, and it's something typical of what we do, is we invited teachers to make some choices. In this synchronous and asynchronous PD, for example, teachers then took the notion of using whiteboards, polls, breakout rooms, and joined us in little mini sessions. For example, one on equity. They chose perhaps teacher clarity, and even engaging tasks. And within those mini workshops, talked about some of their concerns and also used some of those newfound skills. Another example was at the end, we did a closure PD and we used the framework of an escape room, which was hilarious. and engaging for all of the teachers. And an illustration of this as a next step is the success of this then in turn ask teachers to say, hey, can we have another workshop so that we can learn more about how to build one of these for our own classrooms, our own learning, our own thinking. That notion of relationships that we hear echo in all that Krystal talked about, the presentation before us, is so important and continues to be so important with the Petersburg Partnership. Krystal talked a little bit about how we were structured. Our instructional coaches were connected to content areas. They worked very seamlessly and closely and built partnerships with those teachers. That looked like pre-conferencing via email, because of course we were working virtually. That looked like determining goals, what are needs, that back and forth and discussion between the two. We were respectfully asked to go into some of the classes and were invited in, and then there was follow-up. Lots of modeling took place and goes back to that relationship. Modeling was so important because it helped to guide, but it was also an invitation. Could you come in and model? Krystal and Petersburg Partnership already had professional learning communities that were embedded into this. And so we were team members and active members of content and department teams. What did we notice? We noticed so many things, but these are just a couple of highlights I wanted to share. The notion of enhanced collaboration. It wasn't hierarchical. We learned from and with each other. Increased student engagement was a goal for all of us and continues to be, and we saw evidence of that in the research that Maggie and Kasey surfaced for us. And as the self-reflection also was evidenced in the research that Kasey and Margaret shared for us, and they're going to share for us now.
Hi, I'm Kasey, and I'm a PhD student at VCU in the Special Education Department. So Maggie and I joined the team this past summer, and we worked collaboratively with this team to evaluate the Petersburg Partnership. So Maggie's going to go ahead and talk about the methods, collaboration, and the report that we created.
Yeah, so for the evaluation, Kasey and I used a single group retrospective pre-post test mixed methods research design. And so this design was great. It allowed us to consider different types of evidence and allowed us to combine and triangulate claims from the data in order to answer our evaluation questions. Teachers, instructional coaches, and Petersburg High School leadership reflected in the surveys on growth of the teachers as well as their own growth as a result of the program. Kasey and I met regularly from the very beginning with Sande in the Office of Strategic Engagement to ensure alignment between Petersburg and VCU's goals for the evaluation. We co-developed the evaluation questions and the 3 surveys to be in line with the goals of Petersburg High School. As Sande mentioned, the results in the report revealed a successful professional development. The teachers demonstrated growth in pedagogical and content knowledge, integration of technology and virtual tools, and student engagement and sense of professionalism. The participant feedback reported on the survey was used for recommendations for future professional developments and evaluations. So on the screen here are the evaluation questions that guided our evaluation process this summer. This past summer, as I said before, these were co-developed with the Office of Strategic Engagement at VCU and based on the goals and values of Petersburg High School. We based these questions off of the themes and topics covered in the professional development sessions.
So overall, we found that teachers and team members felt the partnership was valuable and that they experienced positive growth from participating in the program. So there were many areas of growth that teachers reported, and these are the top 5 areas of self-reported growth from our teachers. So the number 1 area of self-reported growth was evaluating the effectiveness of activities for promoting student learning. The second area of self-reported growth was collaborating with their coach. The third most reported was incorporating appropriate technology. And I think that came out specifically because of COVID. A lot of teachers were asking for help with technology. Fourth was using the data to design their instruction. And fifth was choosing appropriate resources for students' developmental levels. And then we also shared 2 quotes. So these are 2 reflections shared by a teacher and a coach at the end of the year. So one teacher said that this program has given me lots of new tools along with great teaching techniques. And one of the coaches reflected that the program provides an opportunity for educators to grow as professionals for the benefit of the students.
So where are we now and what's next? Because of this wonderful partnership, we have expanded our scope in Petersburg City Public Schools. So for the 21-22 school year, we have added special education coaches for our middle schools as well as our high school. We only had coaches serving our core content coaches, our core content teachers at our high school this last year, but we've now added a new set of coaches to work with middle school special education teachers as well as high school teachers. This year, we decided to really hone in our practice and select a cohort of teachers needing extra support that were core content as well as those special education teachers. Growing a culture of thinkers. As I stated earlier, this partnership has come from a reflection as well as a strengths-based approach. And having teachers engage in those monthly professional development opportunities were not only for high school teachers this year, but we've expanded that to have our middle school core content teachers and special education teachers be part of that valuable work. And as you saw from the quotes, many of our teachers, to include the VCU instructional coaches, found the partnership valuable to their practice and value to benefiting students. And then the last part that I'm excited about is the coaches that are within Petersburg City Public Schools, as well as our partnership coaches. We're all working from the same coaching framework called the Impact Cycle, using Jim McKnight's work, really thinking deeply about coaching and giving teachers agency over their learning. So that translates into improved student achievement and really supports us in making sure that our teachers are valued, that they trust us, and that they can take what they learned and move it into increased student achievement.
So feel free to reach out to us with any questions or comments. These are our emails. And Maggie is going to attempt to pull up the dashboard to share with all of you. But you can also click on the link in the chat. Sandy shared the link, and we'll go through what the dashboard looks like.
And I'll just hop in here to talk a little bit about the dashboard. It has been amazing. It has been amazing. Our teachers can go back and take a look at the information that they, had before, previous professional developments. If someone missed a session, everything they need is there. And thank you so much to Sande, Dawes, who has been an amazing partner in creating and making sure that this dashboard stays updated. So thank you, Sande, and I'll turn it over.
So just quickly about the dashboards. I mean, we have a dashboard here for you. Oh, sorry. We have a dashboard here for you, but Petersburg had many dashboards that teachers, as Krystal said, could revisit. So all quite exciting.
Yeah, so feel free to go on this in your own time and take a dive. And there's within each of these, there's different links you can click on. So you could spend some good amount of time. Same here, resources for all those different roles that Alison and Destini were talking about. There's resources for each one to dig into. So please feel free to do that.
Well, let me start by saying thank you. That was great. Very interesting presentation, another great example of a university district partnership. And I'm going to ask Alison and Destini to jump back into the moderation circle, and so we can maybe have some dialogue looking at the connections across these projects. And I'm welcome questions from the audience if anybody wants to post something in chat or even request to jump in. But I want to start. I've got a question because this is a topic that is very interesting to me, seeing that MERC is a research practice partnership. I'm interested in the challenges. It's not easy work. It often pushes us into places that as professionals we're not prepared for. So there's two parts to this question. One is I'm interested in what are the challenges you all faced in engaging in sort of research practice partnership work? And that goes to both projects. And then I'm also really interested in, if we think this is a promising model, if we think we need to move more into this partnership type of work, how do we think about developing people's skills in this area? What are the domains of skills that we need? How do we think about preparation for practice or for research that could really help in the future make these partnerships more frequent and work better? So I'll just kind of leave that. There's a lot there, but if anybody wants to start, that'd be great.
So I'll start. One of the challenges was the quick and abrupt shift. We had not prepared to provide instructional coaching virtually. We hadn't planned to provide instructional professional development opportunities virtually. So when we had to pivot, there was a lot of changing on the part of teachers, on the part of VCU, in terms of how do we deliver on the promise of providing equitable opportunities for our teachers, as well as benefiting our students. And so making that pivot required a trusting partnership. And that's one of the things that helped us grow, is that because of the previous partnership work that was done, we were able to trust them, and we worked together to ensure that this partnership, whether it be face-to-face or virtual, that it worked. And it did. And there were lots of meetings. And as I stated before, communication is essential. We had to communicate often to make sure that if there were glitches, if there were things that came up from the one-on-one coaching that teachers didn't know, that we were able to pivot those professional development topics to meet the needs. What we had planned prior to COVID was different than what we had to do when we went to virtual. We had to have Zoom sessions. How do we use breakout sessions? How do we provide small group instruction? Those were things we would not have thought of had COVID not hit. So really those challenges, but it also made the promise effective because we were able to trust the partners that we had built a relationship with.
First of all, I think that those are such great points. I have, from the kind of tenure track faculty member perspective, I have some challenges that I can think of, but first I want to see if Destini wants to chime in.
I would say that one of the challenges, again, would be creating a tentative timeline and expecting there to be changes and being open to the changes, while also being considerate of every person in the partnership schedule. Again, whether that's from a part-time student schedule, of a full-time teacher, or administration perspective, or again, a tenure professor perspective, because again, we all have a lot of things to take in consideration when creating these timelines and partnerships, and understanding what we can handle at a certain amount of time. And then again, just being mindful, and again, understanding that things will change along the way. And then with COVID happening, again, everything had to be taken into consideration. Well, what parts can we do in person? What parts should be done virtually? Should everything be done virtually in order to avoid any conflicts in the future? again, because we are still in an ongoing pandemic.
And Destini, I agree 100% with you, really thinking about what has to be done virtually, what can be done face to face. So we made sure that because we have both our middle school and our high school now participating in our monthly professional development, that we are providing those services virtually. But that coaching support, we are able to go into the building because we're working with a small cohort of teachers.
So I'll just say really briefly, from like the tenure track faculty member perspective, as I think a really common theme that Destini just raised and that was really kind of raised throughout both presentations is the importance of flexibility and also the understanding that like these things, these types of partnerships, because they're so rich and because they're so collaborative, they take time. And unfortunately, with the expectations for getting tenure, for example, the speed at which people are, the speed and the frequency at which people are expected to publish doesn't necessarily sort of comport with that. And so what I would say, so I'll say that I do think that VCU is pretty unique in that regard, that I think that VCU, in a way that a lot of other research-intensive universities do not, they really value the community engagement piece, which from kind of, so I feel like my challenge in that regard is much less than might be the case for people at other research-intensive universities. But I think in terms of like how I balance that, I just refuse to sacrifice the timeline and the flexibility and everything in these partnerships. And then I engage in other projects, for example, working with secondary data that might be able to be published like more quickly without compromising the timeline of the research.
I totally agree. Thanks for that, Alison. And going back to the second question that was raised too about kind of how we're making this a part of the promise to education and things like that. From like a doc student perspective, conversations like these at conferences and, you know, fireside chats and things like that have been so great for me as a doc perspective to like hear what other people are doing, hearing lessons learned, tips and tricks like that. But also from like maybe a more systematic way, I would definitely take a course on something like this. Like as a doc student, I would for sure take a course on this, and like it would be a priority, I think, which would be so cool as a way to kind of bring this in systematically.
Yeah, that's something I'm thinking about, is like, how do we develop courses to train people to do work in research practice partnerships? And this is not a unique idea. It's I'm involved in a network of research practice partnerships across the country, and these courses are starting to emerge in universities. And my question is, if that's the case, and these are not just courses for researchers, but also for practitioners that really want to engage research in meaningful ways in their practice. And I think there's structural things on both sides which inhibit that. And we got to some of those. Some of those were mentioned. But what are some of the skill sets? Now, you know, there was discussion of trust and communication. What other types of skills would we want to develop in researchers, practitioners, in order to really make this work at its best? Any thoughts on that?
I'll say really quickly, something that comes to mind that Destini raised when she was presenting is the experiential knowledge piece and how important that is. And so kind of like thinking of these ideas as I'm saying them out loud, so I'm sorry if they don't make any sense, but something that I think is actually quite unique about VCU's educational psychology program compared to a lot of other programs in the country is that we accept part-time students who, among other things, have this really rich experiential knowledge and insight. And so I would say that in terms of like our field needs to sort of make, I would say, follow VCU's example and accept and really celebrate the wonderful value that part-time students and others would bring to the table. So I would say, but to answer your question, I think that experiential knowledge is huge.
Yeah, and I would just say that's a huge paradigm shift. Thinking that like really valuing practitioner knowledge, and I'm on the same boat. I feel like if we're to really understand and tackle the problems of public education, the experience base of teachers and of school administrators and central office staff is critical to unpacking the nature of the problems, to posing the right questions, and to figuring out how to answer them. And so that's where, and I think your example of in the first presentation between like Alison, the perspectives you brought, and Destini, sort of like the school-based knowledge that you brought and how that made the project so much richer. I was wondering in the Petersburg project, was there kind of a similar kind of, added insights that were gained from having folks that were coming from different, both the university and practice-based setting? Did you see any of that kind of manifest in your work as well?
Absolutely. A lot of times, we have, and I guess every school division, every school has its own culture. And so sometimes we don't really realize that we are part of that culture. And when something is different, it doesn't feel right because it's different. And I think that's where that trust came in, where we both had the researcher voice and the practitioner's voice and perspective on equal footing, because with that built trust. And when you can trust each other, when the coach can trust the teacher and the teacher can trust the researcher, the coach, it certainly benefits the students. So I think really having the researcher perspective and the practitioner perspective on equal footing and seen as partners and not as Sande talked about, not a hierarchical system. I think that is what certainly helped make this partnership work. And because there's room at the table for everybody. We need that research, but practice and being able to take that research and apply it, it's where the rubber meets the road. It's where the kids get to see how, these two worlds collide.
And that rubber meets the road, actually, it goes beyond the PD that we do. It's the coaches going into the classrooms. It's the coaches building the relationships. It's the coaches working intimately, going into teams, being part of those PLCs. And I think this goes back to what Destini talked about earlier, is just having a sense of what's the structure of the day, of scheduling, where does it fit in? And that can be a little bit tricky, but that's actually some of the beauty and the relationships and the thinking and learning that ultimately transfers to the kids. So beyond the PD, it's that drill down that I think was really effective and continues to be an enormous guiding force in the program and the partnership.
We have just 1 minute left. Any closing thoughts? If not, I'm gonna also make a plug for some upcoming sessions that are also kind of exploring this research practice partnership question, and I'd really encourage you to join us at those as well and continue the conversation, because I think it's really, really important work. I think it is part of the solution to the problems that we're facing in public education, is really kind of thinking about how we build on our collective knowledge. And so I would love you to join those. But if there's any other questions or thoughts? Thank you all so much for all your great work and for taking time today for this presentation. And yeah, I think we're at the end. I think the next session starts at 11:30. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.